Okay, welcome to another episode of The Wandering Watercolor. Let's start painting. So this is I've drawn a bunch of. Some of them are drawings, some of them are just print reproductions that I've done just so that I have some things to paint today. And the purpose of this is I'm experimenting with live streaming and also to give people the option to ask questions while live streaming. And I'm just going to go ahead and start. So I always like to have a brush, several brushes, usually just like a couple of, like 2 or 3 big ones, 2 or 3 smaller ones. And these are quill brushes. On the side I have my cup of water. I just don't have space to show it over here. Spare piece of paper, the image that I'm painting, my paint. I always like to mist the paint before I start painting just because it makes it easier. And I want to adjust my screen here for a moment just to make sure that I can, if there's any questions, it'll be easy for me to respond to them. If you hear my mouse clicking in the background, that's why. Let's see. There we go. Okay. Okay, there we go. I have everything set up here. Oh, let me move this. Casting a shadow. Hopefully I don't mess up my camera. Alright. So for this one, it's going to be pretty straightforward. Just kind of a handsome fella here with a scarf. I'm going to wet my brush. So the first thing I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll wet the area that I want to have softer tones, softer blending. That's why I'm using my bigger brush. And actually this brush, I should have rinsed it a little better before starting. But anyway. Okay, so I'm just adding water and just moving it around. And it doesn't have to be perfect. The whole purpose is so that when I lay down the paint, it'll just kind of softly fade out. I'm imagining that the light source is coming from the right. So this side of the whole image will be darker. And I'll go ahead and I'll grab some paint here. I'm using some brown. To be technical, that's English red ochre, is the exact name for this paint. And then some red, a little bit of orange, a little bit of pink. And usually that's how I get my skin tones, is by alternating, kind of mixing those colors. And if I test this one, it's a little too brown. I want it to be a little peachier of a color, so I'm going to add a little bit of more pink. There we go. Let's see, that's a little better, but it still needs a little more red. And with the red, I'm always super careful just because of how strong of a color it is. But that's pretty good right there. So I'll go ahead and I'll start making the initial mark. And the very first layer, the first 1 or 2 layers can be very chaotic. It's not a big deal if it looks a little off, because it's actually fairly easy to adjust. Now, this half of the face is mostly painted, and then I'm going to rinse out my brush and then take off some of the moisture in it, not a lot, but some of it, and then kind of blend that outward. And this will give me a very nice soft blending of the shadows. So that's a good first layer, first coat. And then what I'll do is I might pick up a little extra, dry my brush. I'm just picking up some extra of that. I might blend in the eye a little bit, that way it creates a shadow in the eye. And I'll actually switch to my smaller brush because it's completely dry, and that'll allow me to really create some highlights by picking up that paint. Like that. Rinse my brush. And definitely pick up a little more here. I do want to remember to add some color for the ear. I'm gonna wet my brush, kind of move that around. And then while that's drying, I can go ahead and fill in the scarf. So the scarf, I'll go ahead and I'll make it, I want it to be a warmer color. Let's see, maybe I'll get a little bit of purple and then throw in a little bit of red. Maybe make it a little more violet. And then same thing, remembering where everything is. So for example, I'll go ahead and I'll make the darker marks here. Mess up a little bit, that's alright. On this side. And while everything's still wet, I'm just gonna rinse my brush and then just kind of do one of these numbers like that. Normally, whenever I start off, I try to be a little more loose with everything. Like whenever I do my first, like if I sit down to paint for the day, I'll usually do 1, 2, sometimes 3 paintings. I'm just trying to get warmed up. So this is my first warm-up painting. And I'll go ahead and I'll grab some of the ivory black that I have in my palette. And then I'll add a little bit here, like that. A little bit here, just to establish those values. And it's okay if they blend in with one another. Like that. I'm gonna rinse my brush and then kind of pull out some of that texture, make it a little more expressive. Then rinse my brush. And then go back to adding a little bit more of the scarf color. And then I'll go ahead and I'll grab some more of the purple and a little more of the red. That way I can really start blocking in those darker colors. I'll wait before I go back into the face. Maybe create some texture with the darker tones. And I try to take my time. Just slowly build up like that. And then rinse my brush again. Create kind of like a mid-tone between the darker and the lighter. Pulling out some of those colors. Like that. And every now and then, I'll press down against the paper just to create some texture. Next, for the hair, let me see. The skin tones are still they're still fairly wet, but they're not too wet, so I can actually go in and use the same exact color mixture and maybe double down on some of the darker areas like that. Definitely under the eyebrow, and then here create more of a ridge for the nose like that. Here in the nostrils a little bit. Kind of help to establish the form a little better. And then definitely a little bit here. Rinse my brush. And then fade that edge like that. Pick up some of the excess. And rinse my brush. Definitely pick up a little bit of the excess here. Create a little bit of a highlight on the cheek. Like that. The colors will fade back in a little bit. So even if it looks like a very strong highlight, it'll look just fine once it's dry. And then next, while all of this is drying, I can go ahead and focus on the hair. The way that I'll mix that hair color is I'll grab some teal and some red to create that really nice kind of like Payne's gray, neutral, dark. Since both of those colors cancel out each other so well, it gives you an excellent kind of like organic looking darker hair tone. And what I'll do is I'll actually dilute it with water. Because that's a very strong mixture, I want to dull it down a little bit. There we go. First, I'll just start establishing values. And I'm trying to be careful not to go too far because this area is still wet and I know it'll bleed in a little bit that way. And sometimes that's okay if you're trying to show more expressive blending. And I'm just doing some textures, kind of some sporadic marks to show kind of the hair and how it's forming on top of the head and how it's styled. Just going like that. And then adding a little bit down here. And then rinsing my brush, and there's still color on the brush like that. So I can kind of like a lighter tone, leaving a little bit of white here and there just to create kind of like a highlight. I'm gonna rinse my brush again. And then adding, since this side of the hair is much closer to the light source, I'm just making sure that it's a lighter mixture of paint, but still establishing the color of the hair. There we go. And next, I'm gonna grab some of that darker color mixture and actually add it into the coat, where you can really start establishing really strong contrast and detail. I do want it to be a little more expressive, so it's not just a complete just filling in with the color. I want to show the brush marks. Like that. And then rinsing my brush and then just pulling out some of that color. And then grabbing some more of the color, letting it blend in. Rinsing my brush. And same thing up here, like that. There we go. Grabbing a little more, really darkening the color back here. And just kind of slowly building up the definition through contrast. Just rinsing my brush. And same thing in the hair. So most of the hair is pretty dry right now. I can go in and just start building things up. There we go. And now that most of the skin is dry, I can get a little closer to that edge. Like that. And really just kind of outlining the darkest parts, maybe adding a little bit of a texture here and there. A little bit of a short brush stroke just to show. Just kind of slowly building things up. There we go. And it's just a kind of like a slow, relaxing process as the values are built up. I don't try to rush it. I just kind of go a lot off of feel, just where, like I'll work on one section, I'll let it dry while working on another section. There we go. A little bit up here. Rinse my brush. And there's still paint on my brush. If I test this out, maybe I'll add a little more. I don't want it to be at full strength, but I want it to be kind of halfway so that I can go ahead and make a mark for the eyebrows. The eyebrows are obviously very dark, but I do want to be able to make a part of the eyebrow darker, just to show form. And so that's kind of just filling that in with the brush. There we go. And I can use the same exact color to just add a little bit of to the stubble here. Just very short brush marks, kind of a little sporadic. And then up here, I don't want it to be overpowering. It's very subtle. There we go. Rinse my brush. And the next thing would be, since the skin tones and the parts of the hair that are touching the skin tones are completely dry, I can actually go ahead and focus on further defining the values and the shading. But first, what I want to do is I want to make sure that my brush is completely rinsed, and then there's still a little bit of moisture in the brush, and just kind of this little edge here is bothering me. So I'm just gonna fade that in like that. Just fix it a little bit. And actually, I can go ahead and grab a little bit of pink and mix it in with the skin tone. Not too much, I don't want it to be overpowering. But I can go ahead and use this to establish the tones in the lips. And so I'll go ahead and I'll kind of do the bottom and a little more towards the left side. And then do the same for the upper lip. Rinse my brush. And then with just the water on the brush, pull out the rest of the tone in the lips going to the right. And then dry off my brush. And also pick up some of that excess. Now, if you're thinking that the tone in the lips looks a little strong, you're right, but watercolor dries much lighter, so as it dries, it'll become lighter and it'll look more like a natural tone of the lips. So it's okay that it looks as it does for right now. And I'll go ahead and I'll grab a little bit more of the hair color just to give a little, actually I'm gonna rinse it. I want it to be a little diluted, so like that. Just to add a little bit of a shadow here for the part that's over the ear. Like that. There we go. Looks good. And maybe a little bit up here also. So now I can go ahead and move on to the darker tones in the skin, in the face. So I'll go ahead and I'll grab a little more of my brown. A little more of the English red ochre. And this time I'm going to use more in the mixture and then grab a little bit of red. I'm actually going to have to clean out this red a little bit because it has a little bit of residue of the teal that we mixed up earlier. And so I'll go ahead and I'll grab some of the red, kind of mix it in. I'm going to use this for the darker tones in the skin, and I'm just going to use a little test over here next to the previous skin tone. Okay, and that's fine. That looks just fine. And what I'll do now is I'll go ahead and I'll make sure there's plenty of water on my brush as I start making marks like this, just closer to the left edge of the face, and then going in like that, and then just basically finding where the darker tones would be. Definitely a lot more in the neck here. And now while everything's still wet, I'm rinsing my brush and just fading out this way, like that. And just kind of slowly fading the tones to create that nice transition to show where the lighter parts are, and also keeping some contrast to really develop the form. I don't want the edges of the shading to be very strong. And keeping in mind that all of the marks that I just made will also dry much lighter. I definitely want to increase the shading on the here in the nostrils, a little bit like that, a little bit up here. Some of it is very subtle, just kind of feeling it as you go, and then fading out this. There we go. Also adding just a little bit of a suggestion. I don't want it to be too overpowering, but a little bit of a suggestion right here. Definitely a little bit in the ear, that's showing. Fading out this edge as best I can. Like that. Picking up some of that color. Rinsing my brush. And it looks pretty good so far. I do have to add some color for the eyes. And for the eyes, what I'll do is, first I want to grab just a very, just kind of like a pure brown, and then watering it down with the water that's already on the brush. That's probably a good color. And I'm going to paint in half, actually I'm going to make sure that there's more water on the brush. And what I'll do is I'll paint in half of the eye, the left half of the eye. And that's for both eyes, like that. Then I'm going to rinse my brush and dry it off a little bit, and then fade out that color to the right. What that does is it actually creates more of a three-dimensional feel to the eye, because the eye is a sphere, so it has a little bit of that faded shadow on it. It's very subtle, and that's kind of what I did there. It does look a little weird, but that's okay, because I'm not done with the painting. So the next thing, I do have to pick a color for the background. And I want to make sure that it's not a color that'll clash with the face or the colors that are in the foreground. So I think maybe like a cobalt blue, kind of like a neutral, more neutral blue. I'm just going to clean up a little bit of space here. And go ahead and I'll grab the cobalt blue. And welcome everybody. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask. And thank you for being here. This is my one of my first live streams. I'm very new to live streaming, so I'm still just very much so experimenting with it. And what I'll do is I'm just diluting some of the paint, just a little bit of water, and then I'm just gonna go ahead and start making some marks in the background. And I'm not too worried if it overlaps with the hair. The hair color is pretty dry, so it shouldn't mix in. But I definitely want to get some texture. I want to show some of the paper by pressing down. And then as I go this way, I'm just going to rinse my brush and then just kind of dilute the paint, but still keep those nice brush strokes and show the texture of the paper. Kind of like that. And rinse my brush. I'm gonna set my bigger brush aside, and then I can always go back in for the scarf, further punch up the values, create more contrast. And at this point, I can actually add a little bit of, let's say, phthalo blue into the mix. and maybe a little bit more red to really make it darker, but also make it more paint, less water, to make the marks more contrasting, looking more like ink at this point, to give it a really nice form, like that. Like that. A little bit over here, maybe some outline just to show. Definitely down here. And rinsing my brush off, not completely, but that way I can just create some mid-tones like that. There we go. And rinsing my brush again. So now that the color in the eyes is completely dry, I can actually go ahead and put some ink. This is one of my favorite inking tools. It's just a Uniball Vision. It says right on it, it's waterproof. I don't know if you can see it from that angle. Probably not. I have the focus locked. But I really like using these because I used to use a lot of different ink pens with nibs, and then brush pens, and a lot of them are just kind of like a mess to use and refill, and the ink dries out. I like these ones because the ink has never dried out on me, and they have a really fine point so you can get details. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of just outline some of the color in the pupil, along with the eyelashes, just a little bit, not too much. Also a little bit in the eyebrows. And I like how it immediately makes it look more three-dimensional when you add the ink. Now obviously you could use just watercolor, like a black watercolor, but because the ink has a little bit more shine to it when it dries, it helps to look darker. It just looks, it doesn't look as matte, so it helps details stick out. So I'm just gonna add that here. Same thing, there we go. And I can go ahead and start looking for places that I want to add a little more texture, like here. And I try to do it a little more sporadically, so it's kind of, I go by feel more than logic, I guess. Sometimes I try not to think about it too much, because then if I overthink it, it'll just, it won't look as organic, if that makes sense. Just adding some more here, a little bit here, like that. Down here, definitely by the scarf. Maybe even a little cross-hatching. Just to further create contrast. And it also creates a little more movement in the image, which I think makes it look more interesting. Now, one trick that I like to use if I'm not sure if I want to add ink somewhere is actually I'll go back in with a pencil. And so, for example, for the nostrils, I do think that they get lost a little bit. So if I go ahead and outline with a little bit of graphite, it'll actually help me decide whether or not I want to add ink, because I can always just go back over and erase the graphite. It helps me determine how much to add. So let's see if I add a little bit here. I'm just gonna step back from the desk just for a moment because it'll help me get a better understanding. So yeah, I think this one looks pretty good. I actually like how it looks. I may go back in later and maybe add a little bit of shading in the teeth. But I've been working on this one for, I don't know, a good half hour so far. So I'll go ahead and I'll move on to the next one. And I have a stack here of things that I had prepared for the live stream. And so I'm just trying to decide which one. I tried to imagine what I would look like as an old artist, and that's kind of what I came up with. I really love painting old people just because there's so much information and so much character. Let's see. I'll probably do this one. I think this one is going to be a very nice and expressive one just because of the composition. And I like to kind of go in between doing more expressive and then more controlled paintings. With this one, I'm going to be very loose in establishing the basic shadows and colors. So the first thing that I want to do is I'm just going to quickly lay down some color for the coat that she's wearing. And so same thing. I'll reverse it. I was thinking about making the light source from the right. I'm gonna go ahead and make the light source from the left. It'll make it a little more dramatic, a little more mysterious also, because most of the face will be hidden in shade. So what I'll do is I'm gonna grab the green here, and then I'm just gonna, where I know that it's going to be very dark, I'm adding mostly paint and very little water, and kind of establishing some of the detail with the darker tones, but not too much. And then so the next thing I want to do is I'm just going to grab water. I've barely rinsed my brush, but I'm just going to grab water and then just go like this. Pull that color out this way to really create the highlights on the left, since that's where the light is coming from. I'm going to rinse my brush, so now there's almost no paint on the brush, and then just go back in the opposite direction. That's one trick that really helps. It's a trick that really helps kind of establish values quickly. I'm trying to find out where my chat went. Oh, okay, there's my chat. And if anybody has any questions, please don't hesitate. I don't even know if my chat's working right now on the count of I'm trying a new streaming software since I'm very new to streaming. Okay, so now basically I have the very first layer established, and I'll go ahead and just using, again, just straight, very little water, mostly paint, and then just further kind of emphasize the shadows, really establish those values. I can go in and layer other colors later on, but this helps to quickly set the mood of the painting. And also it's good to create these markings just because it's almost like an exercise. It loosens you up while you're painting. I'm gonna go like this. And maybe a little bit back here like that, not too much. And so the next thing, I'm just gonna leave this as is. Maybe pull out a little bit, maybe pull a little bit of color out this way. Just because it looks a little too bland down here. There we go. And just move that out. There we go. That's good. And so the next thing I want to do is for the face, The previous one that I had just painted, what I did was I added a lot of water as the first layer, and then all the colors on top of it to just kind of fade out slowly. With this one, I'm going to do a different strategy. So I'm basically going to mix up some skin tone, and then do the same thing that I did here for the coat. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab some brown, mix in a little bit of red, not too much because red can be a very overpowering color. A little bit of pink, a little bit of orange, and that's actually too orange. I'll go ahead and I'll grab more brown. And I'm just gonna turn this around so I can test my colors. Let's see. That's a decent skin tone, but it's too orange, so I want to add a little more red. Make it more of like a peachy color. Let's see. Maybe a little more pink. There we go. Okay, that's a great skin tone. And what I'll do is I'm going to go ahead and on this side of the face, I'm just going to block in, and I'm painting over the eye and the lips and everything. I'm not worried about the details. I'm worried about getting the basic value form down. And so once this is all established like this, what I'm doing is I'm rinsing my brush and then pulling out the tones this way. This eye, I'm just going to leave it as is, just because I want to show the highlight. This one is in shadow, and this one has some light bouncing off of it, or more light, I should say, bouncing off of it. And you can see how quickly that establishes the base layer. Now what I can do is, I'm going to go ahead and switch to my smaller brush, and since this brush is already dry, I can start picking up some of the tones. Definitely here for the cheek, like that. You know, for the nose, create more of a. Rinse my brush again. Kind of blend that out. And I'm never really worried about the first layer because I can always go in and layer shadows to go ahead and adjust things, and I kind of use that to tweak things as I go. Especially since I do make mistakes sometimes, like a little bit here in the forehead above this eyebrow. I'm not very happy with how that looks, but as it dries and I layer things, I can finagle it to make it look like how I want. Just gonna kind of fade this out. But what is important is that I have the highlights where I want them. I may add a little bit of a highlight on this side, just kind of like where the edge is. You know, like a reflexive highlight. Just a little bit, you know, like whenever you have light creeping in from the background. And now I can also grab the darker skin tone that I mixed up and just add a little bit in the ear, like that. Make it look more three-dimensional over here in the neck. And maybe even a little bit going like this because of the hair. rinse my brush and then fix this little soft edge like that. And that's okay for now. I'll go back into it and fix it more with shadows. And in the meantime, I can go ahead and focus on the hair. So for the hair, basically, I'm just going to use the same mixture because I want it to be a very nice, dark, contrasting hair where I can really establish the highlights. So for that, I'll use teal. Use some teal. And then just pure red. And just mixing them together gives me a very nice kind of like neutral gray or Payne's gray, which is excellent for doing dark hair colors. And let's see, I need, because this is, the hair is almost a third of the painting, I want to make sure that I have a good amount of the hair color mixed up. That way it's, I don't run out and then have to mix more while I'm in the middle of painting. Go ahead and grab more teal. Let's see. There we go. Looks a little better. Like that. Okay, that's good. So the way I'll do it is the same way that I established the values for the coat and then the face. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm imagining if the light is coming from the left, where the darkest parts of the hair would be. So obviously one of them would be right here. And I'm not too worried about being perfect with the way that I lay down the initial mark. I do want to make sure that it shows enough expression so that it's not stiff looking. A little bit like this. I can worry about the finer details and then the hairs that are kind of going into her face later. But for now, I just really want to establish those really dark, defining edges. Like that. Maybe some texture. It's okay if this blends in a little bit. And down here. Going like this. Okay, and now I'll rinse my brush, but there's still some paint on there. And so I'm just kind of looking for those mid-tone values in the hair. I do want to leave some parts pure white to show highlights. So I'm just kind of going, this is in the, kind of like in the midway of the hair color. Let's see, like this. Definitely back here a little bit as I continue that hair highlight going downward. I actually want to break it up a little bit. I don't want it to be like a continuous highlight going down here. And also going over here like that. Rinsing my brush. A little bit back here also. There we go. Can somebody just drop like a hi or something in the chat? I just want to make sure my chat is working. Again, I'm very new to live streaming because I don't see anything in my chat. So I don't know if it's don't know if it's on my end or... I'm just gonna dry my brush, and I'll go ahead and I'll switch over to my... Hey, okay, cool. I appreciate that, Moonbell. Thank you. I just want to make sure it's working. Okay. So now, while the hair is drying and while this part of the face is also finishing to dry, I'll go ahead and create a little more contrast and shading in the coat. So the way I'll do that is I'll grab the green that I used initially, and I can do one of two things. I can either put just the red that I have, which is this scarlet red, which is it's a very strong red, or I can go ahead and add some purple. The purple, what it'll do is it'll make it look, it'll make the darker portions look cooler, more like shadows, as opposed to just a darker version of the color. So that's what I'm aiming to do. I may also throw in a little bit of red. So I'm grabbing the purple, mixing it in, and yeah, that's a pretty good, I would say that's a good shadow kind of like tone to work with. And so with this, I'll go ahead and I'll put that in here, and this time I'm going a little more careful. And adding those details. Just slowly showing some of the folds in the coat. And rinsing my brush, pulling out kind of like a diluted shadow tone here. Like that. You can kind of see the slow buildup of form through the use of shadows and highlights. I guess more so through the use of shadows, since the highlights is just kind of like the part that you don't touch. Like that. There we go. And while this is drying, I'll go ahead and focus back in the face. And for that, so I already have my skin tone. I haven't added anything to the skin tone. I'm basically using the exact same color mixture that I made earlier. But when I go over with the exact same skin tone mixture, it just makes everything look darker because it's just layering it on there. And this time I'm a little more conscious of how I'm laying down the colors. And I do want to create a little bit of a highlight on the cheek. And kind of slowly fading out towards the left side of the face. Rinsing my brush. And fading out the edge here, like that. Definitely a little bit of this edge, going this way. And also a little bit, kind of do a little bit of I think a little bit of green got in my skin tone, but I'll soften this up. Going down this way, like that. Now, this mark looks very dark, but it will lighten up a lot. As the paint dries, because it's mostly water. So it's a little deceiving like that. But I do want to show a little subtle variation in the shading. It can't be it can't all be very contrasting unless the light is very strong. Fade that out. Fade this edge. Same with this edge. And just kind of slowly working out the edges. There we go. And for the lips, kind of like the same thing with the previous one that I painted. Oh hey, Moonbell asked, she said she's beautiful. Who is she? Thank you for asking. So this is, I had seen her in a magazine. Actually, I was in a dentist office, and I saw her in a magazine, but she wasn't like this exactly. I added, I kind of turned her face a little bit and added the coat. But in terms of who she is exactly, it's just, it's kind of like a magazine model, I guess. I often, if I'm in the waiting room or just looking through like the newspaper, or if I ever see somebody that I think would be interesting to sketch out or paint, I'll often just, because I bring my sketchbook everywhere, I just sketch them out, and then I'll kind of create a variation of them to my liking, and then that's usually almost everything that I paint during my live streams is just either somebody that I saw somewhere, I don't necessarily remember where because I sketch all the time, or in like a magazine or on social media. But I do remember she was in a magazine that was like on the coffee table at a dentist office. Gotcha. Yeah. So for the lips, I'm adding a little bit of the brown, which, to be exact, it's English red ochre. That's the exact brown color that I'm using. And adding some pink. I'm just going to test that color and add a little bit of red. I want it to be close enough to the skin tone where it looks like it belongs, but also be enough of a difference so that it looks like lips. Okay, so that's a good color. Do I do videos of sketching them too? I should. I know that sometimes if I'm in a coffee shop or at an airport, I'm often sketching people, and then I'll just give it to them after I've sketched them out. So I don't do videos of them, but I often take a picture of the person, and then if they allow me, I'll take a picture of them holding the painting. So maybe I'll make like a post or like a short video showing some of those, because those are always fun. People are usually pretty cool about it. Sometimes they're like, the heck's this guy doing? But for the most part, people seem to like it. This is a lot of paint and not a lot of water here on the lips. And I'm adding just a little bit, like that. And then I'm just gonna rinse my brush. There's still a little bit of the paint left on the brush, but I'm basically pulling out the color, like that. And while everything is still wet, I can go in and remove some of that color for highlight. Yeah, I bet Moonbell said, I bet their reactions are awesome. Yeah, it's always fun to make a complete stranger smile. But I will say it is a little weird because sometimes they see you looking at them while you're sketching them and they're like, what's this guy doing? So there is always that risk. So now while this is wet, I'm just picking up for a highlight. go. So that looks pretty good. And now for the eyes. What I'll do is, for her eyes, I think what I'll do is I'll mix kind of like a blue-green, or maybe just use the teal that I have here. Just because I think this color will make the piece look more interesting. But I don't want the color that I use, I don't want it to be too strong. So I might dull it down a little bit by throwing a little bit of orange, since blue and orange are complementary colors. Let's see. Okay, I think that's good. So for the one that's back here, I'm just gonna fill it in, and I'm not going to worry about creating kind of like a faded look in the eye. But for this one, I'm gonna go ahead and fill in about half of it, and then rinse my brush. So there's still a little bit of paint on the brush, but it's mostly water. And running it back this way, I'm just gonna pick up some of the color. It creates a little bit of that kind of like that faded look, where it's, you know, if you're looking at a sphere, you have that faded shadow. Oh, nice. I pictured her with that color eyes. Yeah, I usually try to keep in mind, you know, the surrounding colors, so that it goes with the surrounding colors as opposed to clash with them. I am going to grab this brush because it's a little stiffer, and it'll make it a little easier to, I don't like this color right here. Using a stiffer brush kind of helps pick up colors like that. Glossy, okay. And the eyebrows, I almost forgot the eyebrows. I have to grab some of the color here, but use water to dilute it, because I don't want it to be super strong. I want to establish the first layer of the eyebrows, like that, and just kind of form it a little better. And use the previous mixture that I have for the hair, so I can go ahead and add much more contrast. So for example here, I'm just gonna go ahead and basically almost what I did before, just focusing more on the edges. And we have some more of the color down here. Hair coming down from the face. Maybe a little bit going up a little further, and reducing the amount that I'm laying down as I go further to the left, since that section is supposed to be lighter. And you can see the more that I add colors on this side, the more this side looks lighter. Just adding a little more texture here and there. Like that. Rinse my brush. Now, if I really want to separate the figure from the background, I would add a dark colored background, and that'll really make her pop, but it'll also make the highlights, the kind of like the light that's shining on her, the lighter areas will look a lot lighter, basically. And I'm thinking what I'll do is I'll add a little bit of a secondary color to the eyebrows just to make them look a little more three-dimensional. And I can go ahead and, for the finer outlines, I can go ahead and use my fine liner as I did in the previous one. And same thing, basically I want to kind of focus a little bit on the eyelashes. A little bit in the pupil. And same here. And also up here for the eyebrows. Just a little bit. I'm trying not to outline everything. I just want to kind of give the suggestion. And more so in the hair, I can just really kind of double down on the darker parts of the hair. And you can see how much, like, the higher contrast of the ink really helps to create that three-dimensional look. Also, it looks more expressive, I think. But at this point, what I think I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll pick a color for the background, just to show how much it'll make everything pop. And so for the color, what I'll do is I'll use some of the purple, but I don't want it to be purple just because it'll clash, I think, too much with the green. Since they're almost complementary colors, they're kind of like, it's almost like a split complementary color. I'm going to grab the phthalo blue so that I can push the purple more towards the blue. And this will give me a really nice dark contrasting, or a cool dark contrasting color for the background, which will make the figure just pop out a lot more. Moonbell asked if that was a marker or a pen. So this is a pen, actually. I talk this pen up a lot, to my friends and just people in general. So this is called the Uniball Vision. It's a waterproof pen, but it has a fine tip, And so I don't know if you could see just because I have my focus locked on my camera. And just to give you an idea of how many different inking tools I have, let me just open up my drawer here that's right below. So this is one that I used to use a lot. This is a fountain pen with a fine tip nib. But it would always clog, because if you don't use it for a certain amount of days, like if you let it go for more than like a week, it'll clog. And then these fine point little markers are also, I used to use them a lot, the Micron. Then I also used to have a repeatograph or isograph rotoring. These are really good for the really fine marks, but the problem is that you also have to use them regularly, and because of how fine they are, they end up clogging up often. Like, see, this one's clogged right now. And besides that, I also have these ones, which are brush pens. You know, you fill them up with ink and then you just use them. Same problem. For some reason, all of these, the ink dries out in them. But with this one, maybe because it's an actual fine tip ballpoint pen, I've never had a problem with it drying out. And so now I've basically just switched to just using these. I barely ever use any of the other inking tools. So, by the way, they don't pay me for me saying that. If they happen to see this somehow, I will gladly take payment from them, because I've recommended this pen to so many people. And if you buy it online, if you buy it in bulk, you can get them as cheap as like 50 cents a piece. And they last a long time. So I always try to share this one with my art friends. There you go. That's probably way more information than you needed. But okay, yeah. So back to mixing the background color. So basically, I'm adding a bunch of blue to the purple, because I want it to be blue with a hint of purple, as opposed to just purple. And you're welcome. The name, one more time, is Uniball. You can sometimes just find it in like Office Depot, but it's Uniball Vision Fine Point, and it says right on it, I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but it says right on it, waterproof/fade proof. So I've done ink sketches with it before, and then just painted right over it, and it works just fine. I can do one in a little bit if you want, just to show you after I'm done with this one. Okay, so I'll go ahead and I'll start blocking in the background. Oops. Yeah, so I definitely cut into her face a little bit here. It's okay, that happens sometimes. And I'm just kind of going here slowly. Actually, let me get my fine point brush so I can more carefully fill this in. And as I establish the background values, you can see how much it'll make everything else pop. If there's a little bit of variation in the color of the background, I think that's fine, because it's close enough to where it's not it's not that big of a differentiation. There we go. And then going around the other side. And you can see how using this dark color in the background immediately makes everything else pop. Okay. And one last thing before I move on to the next one, I do think that some of the facial details kind of get lost. And so I can do the same thing that I did with the previous one. Well, I gotta make sure I rinse my brush completely so that on the next one I don't have like colors from the previous painting. There we go. So just like with this one, I just added a little more detail with using the pencil. I can do the same here. Because I do like the subtle features in her face, I can just go ahead and add a little bit of graphite like this, just so that it's not overpowering, but it is more noticeable. There we go. Okay, so that's 2 down. And so for the next one, I do have some options here from some lithograph prints, along with some sketches that I've made. So I'll let you guys decide. So this is an old sailor. It's a girl with a straw hat. This is kind of what I imagine myself when I'm old, just like obsessed with art supplies. I have this lady here, a little tea shop that I made for, this is a while back. This is a frog that I had made having some tea, and then a samurai frog, obviously, why not? So which one out of all of these would you all like to see me paint next? And obviously I describe all my technique as I paint everything. I'm gonna see if anybody has any suggestions. Otherwise, I'll just pick. And this is the one that I had just finished. Thanks, Moonbell. So between the sage frog and an older version of you. Got it. Okay, thank you. And thank you for joining. Or girl in garden. Okay, let's see. Girl in garden. You know what? Why not? Let's see. Also, I'm not sure what the latency is for when if somebody types something. I don't know how long it takes for it to show up on my end. Well, let's see. We'll go with this one. Unless somebody else has a different suggestion, I'll go ahead and I'll work on the girl in garden. Just gonna switch out my little plate. If anyone's curious, this is just a soap dish. You can get them anywhere. You get them at Walmart for like $1. Because they're porcelain, they're excellent for mixing colors. I'm gonna move these here. I'm gonna flip that around. Oh, cool. Thanks, that's very useful, actually. Okay, so there's very little latency. Cool, thank you. Okay, so the girl in the garden. She is based on my wife. I just kind of, when I drew it out, it was more from memory. So it looks like her, but not quite. It's similar enough, but it doesn't. There's some differences. If my wife sees this, she knows exactly where I messed up. But it does look like a good painting. I do like how it looks, so it's still worth painting. Okay, so with this one, what I'm going to do is imagine that the light is coming straight down, you know, like she's outside in the garden, meaning that there's going to be some cast shadows on the face, on the neck, from the little sleeve here. And I always like to start with the skin tones whenever I'm painting people, because what that does is if I go outside of the lines, that's okay, but having the skin tones dry faster also helps with all the other details, like shading, wrinkles, if that applies. I'm gonna switch to this brush just because this one's a little stiffer. This one's a little soft. This one's a little stiffer. So I have like a million brushes. So if you're also an artist watching this, you know exactly what I mean. Like having way too many brushes. Okay. So get started here. You may have noticed I have this color right here, which is called Coral Reef. It's a Daniel Smith color. So I often use this if I'm out and about sketching. This is my cheat. I cheat with using this color because it's already like a skin tone. So it's you can push it either way. You can make it darker or lighter by adding other colors to it. So that's kind of what I'm going to do here. I'm just going to add a bunch of that color as the base, and then mix in a little bit of, let's see, a little bit of orange, a little bit of pink, a little bit of brown, because it's too, this color is too light. I need a little bit of brown in there. Let's see. That's better, but I also need a little bit of, I gotta clean up this red. I'm gonna grab a little bit of red. Oh, yeah, that's way too much red. That I'm always worried about. That's the thing with red, is just it's a very overpowering color. So I'm just gonna throw in a little bit of brown. And mixing skin tones is probably one of the harder parts when watercolor painting, just because skin tones are very subtle, and then watercolor can easily make Like just adding a little bit too much can easily shift the hue that you're working on. Okay, so I think this is an okay color. So the way that I'll do this is, first I'm gonna have to think about where the highlights are. So the hat, the shadow is gonna fall down probably right about here. So that this part will be much darker, and then this part will be lighter, and the face like right until there maybe. Okay, I think you get it. So let's just start painting. So I'm just gonna go ahead and establish those darker values like this, and I'll be trying to follow the contour of the face like that. And also here for the neck, so that's the cast shadow. I'm primarily focusing on the cast shadows right now. Maybe create a little bit of a wave here in this shadow. There we go. Now I'm rinsing my brush and then just using the lighter color Now there's two ways that I could have gone about this. One of them is to just do a flat wash to fill in the colors, and the second one is just to do what I'm doing right now, which is kind of basically do two separate fill-ins. I chose this one because it's faster, but I will also adjust the color of the shading in a little bit. There we go. So this is kind of like a quick way to really get the colors in. Just rinsing my brush. So I think so far I've gone over three different ways to fill in the shading on the skin. Like with him, this is the very first one that I did during the live stream, and I just put a lot of water on the face, and then when I put in the rest of the colors, just kind of faded them out towards the lighter area. With her, I added the darker tones first, and then pulled the lighter tones out of the darker tones going towards the light source. With her, it was a third technique, which is basically laying down the shadows first, which is a darker variant of the skin tone, and then filling in the skin tones with the flat wash. Just to point out that you can use many different techniques whenever painting with watercolors. Even if you're painting the same thing, you can always kind of play around with them. Okay, so I'm just gonna rinse my brush. And let's see. So now for the hat, I'm just gonna use just brown. Actually, what I'll do is I'll use two colors. I'm gonna mix up a little bit of pure brown, or English red ochre if you want the technical name, and then grab some yellow and make sure that both of them have a good amount of water so that I can let them bleed into one another. So what I mean is I'll go ahead and I'll add the yellow portion up here, maybe a little bit here like this. Rinse my brush, grab the brown, and then start filling that in. And intentionally letting them blend into one another. not being too worried about the details at the moment. Rinse my brush. And I'll go ahead and I'll grab my fine point brush and add more of the darker color underneath here, just to really create that sense of shadow. Since it's on the bottom of the hat, obviously it's much darker, especially if she's outside during the sunny day. But I also don't like how light the hat appears, so I do want to add a little more color into it and kind of fade it in with the yellow. There we go. And pick up some of the excess up here just to show the highlight. Like that. Now for the hair, it's kind of like a darker blonde. I'm going to go ahead and go like this. So this part of the hair is still under the shade of the hat. Use some water, pull out the rest. Rinse my brush. A lot of the techniques that I'm going over are more for expediency. Part of the thing that I really love about watercolor is that I think it's honestly the fastest medium, maybe second only to ink. Obviously sketching with a pencil is the fastest, but in terms of rendering and painting with multitudes of colors, I do think that watercolor is the fastest. And I think part of the reason I'm always thinking about the speed of painting is because I'm so used to being outside and sketching people and places, and you have to be quick when you're doing that. So that's a lot of what I'm trying to convey in my live stream. Just doing a little bit like this with the purple. I'm gonna rinse my brush. And fade some of this out. And if anybody has any questions whatsoever or critiques, please don't hesitate. I like getting feedback from people. So the skin tones are pretty much dry, so I can go ahead and use the color that I already mixed up to add some further shading, like for example here in the palm where the fingers are curled, maybe a little bit kind of like a shadow showing the direction that the light is coming from. Normally I like to fade out the shading, but because she's outside and the light is really strong, the shadow would be more defined like this. And I also really like watching how laying down the lines of the shadow makes everything look so much more three-dimensional. Like it automatically adds dimension to the image. I'll rinse my brush. And actually, I can go ahead and start adding a little bit of detail maybe in the hair using the darker mixture, mixing it in with some of the brown. Go ahead and add texture, since it's not just a flat object. The hair has a lot of dimension to it. Definitely down here, closer to the neck. Just whatever is in shadow. Kind of fade some of that out. There we go. Rinse my brush. Now for the flowers, I can be a little more expressive. So, like, let's say if I pull this down a little bit. And go ahead and grab some green. And then just kind of fill in some of the portions that are not flower heads. But I'm not too worried about being perfect. I just kind of want to give the suggestion. Rinse my brush. And for the flower heads themselves, what I want to do is, because of how light this image is so far, adding some purple on this side will actually help kind of balance it out. But it's not gonna be a lot of purple, and it's not gonna be very strong. I just want to have some in there. So, like, let me make sure it's not too dark. That's good. So just a little bit here and there in the flowers. Almost like a vignette, like more towards the front. And then as it fades away from the focal point, it just kind of gets a little more distorted, a little more abstract. There we go. And then maybe get a little more in here. Okay, I'm gonna rinse my brush. And grab some yellow. Now for this part, I want to have a higher concentration of yellow and a little bit of water, not too much. So let's say like that, kind of like where the center of the flowers would be. Like that. I'm just giving a little bit of a suggestion. Maybe a little bit here. I'll rinse my brush. Now, one trick for whenever painting shadow on like clothing that's pure white, what I would do is I would grab a little bit of brown and then a little bit of blue. And so if you, I have two options. So I have phthalo blue or cobalt blue. Cobalt blue is a little more neutral, so it'll make it look more like a shadowy color. Using phthalo blue will just make it look more like a gray, but it'll look like a strong gray. It's not necessarily like a shadow color. So just because of I want it to look a little more dull, the way that shadow on a white fabric might look, as opposed to like the gray of a metal. That's why I'm using the cobalt blue. If anyone is wanting to get technical about the details. Okay. And so this is exactly the color that I'm going for, but it's too strong. So what I need to do is I need to add a bunch of water to the mixture and make it lighter, or more transparent, I should say. Almost there. Kind of like that. That's pretty good. So now I just have to imagine, since the light source is coming from the top, for example, right here, this is all going to be in shadow, and then maybe over here a little bit, same with this. I'm just trying to think of where the shadow would fall on the dress. That, maybe a little bit for the folds of the dress. A little bit back here. And I can always fade out the edge. It doesn't have to be like a strong edge. Like that. You do always have to be careful, because you could make it look, using this kind of shading technique can make it look muddy if you use too much, or if you're not fading it properly. But I think this looks fine. Rinse my brush. And I'm just going to use a little bit of brown here at the bottom for where the wooden part of the shelving is for the flowers. I'm just going more towards the back like that. Not too much, just a little bit, just to make a suggestion. And also adding a little bit more here, just punching up the colors of the shadow in the hat. And rinsing my brush, fading out some of that color. There we go. Rinsing my brush again. And I think this is pretty good. I can always go in and add maybe a little bit of like atmospheric blue in the background. But I actually like how this looks. It looks very clean, almost like a postcard or a greeting card. So before I move on to the next one, this is what I've painted so far during the live stream. So I have this one. This was the very first one, which is kind of like soft mixing of shadows with some textures and edges in the hair and clothing. And this one was a mixture of establishing the shadow or the darker parts first, and then pulling out the lighter parts from the darker parts. And in this one that I just finished was more an exercise of layering with flat washes. And so the next one, I have several options here. And let's see, I'm just going to move this to the side. So I have this older sailor that I sketched out. It was probably like 2 weeks ago. I've been meaning to paint him. This is a lithograph print that I had made a while ago. I had painted this one during a live stream on another platform. This is just kind of what I imagine myself as an old man, just obsessing over art supplies. This is also another one that I had painted during another live stream on another platform. And then I have this tea shop. This is one that I had used multiple times during art classes that I do locally. This is just a frog sipping some tea, samurai frog getting some tea, and then this toad on a mushroom. So if anybody has any suggestions on what you would like me to paint next out of all of these ones, let me know. I'm just gonna move my dirty soap dish and then bring out a clean soap dish. This is my favorite thing to mix my colors on, is soap dishes, just because they are easy to clean, very cheap. I've broken a few of these and I don't worry about them, since you can get them anywhere pretty much for next to nothing. So toad on toadstool. Okay. Welcome back, Moonbell. Yeah, so let's do that. So this one is more of a cartoony one. So it's less of a... Actually, sometimes it's nice to do more cartoony ones, because, they're kind of silly, but you use stronger colors, and it's less about perfection, more about having fun. And with this one, what I'll do is, obviously the mushroom is going to be red, naturally, and his kimono is going to be a mixture of... okay, I'll make it a mixture of pink and orange, and I'll show you why. It's actually going to look pretty cool. Since he's outside, I'm imagining that the light is coming straight from the top. Oh, Moonbell said, or the older version of you. Okay, I'll do that one next. But let's see. So this one... so I'm just going to grab some red, and I'm using my bigger brush that has a softer brush head, just because it's... using bigger brushes forces you to not worry as much about detail. So that's both an advantage and a disadvantage, I guess, depending on how you look at it. So I'm just filling in the color here. I'm just gonna pull out the color upwards from that. So this is more like an illustration that I might do for a children's book or a poster. Just pulling that out. And I'll go ahead and I'll grab a little bit of yellow, just to mix in, make it look more interesting. A little more on this side. And rinse my brush. I'm gonna grab the orange. Go ahead and fill in these parts. And up here, like that. And grab some yellow. Oh wait, I said I was gonna make the kimono pink and orange. Darn. Okay, that's alright. I'll go ahead and I'll do this. Since everything's still rather wet, I'm gonna grab a paper towel. There we go. I'm just gonna go like this. We'll just call that an underlayer. I do like to point out that I do make mistakes regularly while painting. Whenever I post things, they're usually edited. That's actually kind of nice about doing live streams. It shows you how you correct things. Okay, so now I'm just gonna go ahead and add the pink. There we go. I'm adding, since pink is it's a fairly light color, using more paint and less water usually yields better results. And I'm gonna go ahead and grab some yellow to blend in, kind of like almost like a two-toned kimono. I'll rinse my brush a little bit and pick up some of that color up here to create more variation. Rinse my brush. Okay. And now obviously the color down here dried much lighter, so I can go ahead and reapply if I want to have that nice kind of like cartoony illustration saturation of color. Rinse my brush and then fade this out. Okay, I'll rinse my brush again. And while this is all drying up here, I can go ahead and grab some of the green for the grass down here. Like this. And pull out some of that color, maybe fade it out a little bit. There we go. I'll rinse my brush again. And as far as the color of the frog, I'll actually go ahead and I'll mix some green with yellow. And just kind of start off from where the shadowy parts of the frog's skin would be. Rinse my brush and fade out to darker tones to fill in the rest. go. And I can always go back in for to bump up the shadow portions. But for right now, I'm just going to pick up some of the highlights. Like that. And then just continue, same thing, the darker portion here. Add the color to the shaded parts. And kind of here, same thing. And fading out the color. This way I get to have some variation in the amount of light and shadow while I'm laying down the initial layer and then just building up off of it. Okay, here's a little bit like that. And now I can go in and grab some more of the pink if I want to really punch up some of the colors in the kimono. Like that. Oh, I forgot a little spot in here. There we go. A little bit of a, I'm going to clean up my yellow and grab a little bit of yellow, add it in here. There we go. While this is drying, I'll go ahead and I'll go back into the mushroom. I'm going to grab a little bit of the brown, not too much. And then also a little bit of the cobalt blue to create more of like a neutral brown, which I'll use as the base color for the stem and the mushroom. So first, this part is all in shadow, like that. And the rest of it is, let's say, right here, something like that, is where the shadow would fall from the mushroom cap onto the stem. And down here, for the part that's kind of like curving in, and also a little bit of a texture because it's a very textured surface, and then grabbing some water and then just doing this and rinsing my brush and drying it off and letting that dry. And while that's drying, go ahead and grab some of the green. And actually, I'm going to make it a little darker this time. So I'm going to grab the green, a little bit of brown. There we go. So now I can really kind of do the outlines of the shading in the frog. Kind of like the tendons here. The anatomy, maybe a little bit like that. Here a little bit like that. Down here from the kimono, shadow that's cast on the foot. Up here in the face, some texture. A little bit here for the lip. Over here in the eyes. Definitely here. And down here for the leg. Okay, let's see. Looks pretty good. I'll go ahead and I'll grab some of the ivory black just straight from the palette and go in and lay down the color for the sheath. Then the color for the belt, I'm just going to use some teal. It's a darker teal. Like that. And then I want to use the same color for the handle. Rinse my brush and then just kind of fade some of that out. And do the same for the little pattern. And so the next thing I want to do is add more detail in the mushroom. So the base of the mushroom, let me get some phthalo blue. I'm going to get some phthalo blue to mix it in with the brown. Give me that nice darker color. So I'm just going to add a little bit of texture here. Not too much, but just to show that it's there. Create some variation in the color. And then add some texture in the stem. We already have the shadow established, but I do want to show that there's more texture. Like that. A little bit here and there. There we go. Just rinsing my brush. The next thing I want to do is mix up some of the atmospheric blue for the background using some teal along with some phthalo blue, because that gives you a really nice blue that works just great for sky whenever you're trying to make more like an illustration like this. Okay, so I'm just gonna go ahead and start blocking in the background, trying not to go inside of the frog. Just kind of carefully. Like that. Making some more expressive marks here and there. There we go. Grabbing some more paint. And just kind of slowly. This color doesn't work really well with the handle of the short blade katana. Like that. And rinse my brush. I know how to fix that. The way I'll fix that is I'll just grab some purple and just add that in. Rinse my brush and kind of move around the color so it makes a little more sense with the texture of the handle. Like that. There we go. Okay, so I think that looks pretty good. Here's the results so far. So this is the very first one that I painted during this live stream. Then this is the second one, showing some different fading techniques. This is the third one, layering, different ways to layer, to show how to layer the shadows. And this is the last one, just because I've been streaming for I think like 2 hours. But basically, this one's just more of a cartoony one. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Let's see. Yeah, it's been a minute. If you have any questions, always feel free to drop a comment, shoot me a message. And I'm gonna try to stream every Saturday around this time. Whether or not it'll happen, we'll see. But I'll see you next time.